Hi and welcome to the 10th edition of our video series where we are going to build up a DevSecOps pipeline with GitHub.
In this episode, we are going to figure out how to do proper branch protection and do pull requests.
In our past 9 videos, we went and built up our DevSecOps pipeline with GitHub, which you can see here.
This included how to actually build our code.
After that, with the software composition analysis, we checked the dependencies of our code for vulnerabilities.
Then we did license compliance checks, which means figuring out whether all licenses our dependencies have are okay for our project.
Then we executed static application security testing, which is finding vulnerabilities in our code.
We went on and did container scanning, which means scanning the containers we use for vulnerabilities.
After that, we introduced secret detection, where we find secrets that are introduced into our code.
And we went on with doing dynamic application security testing, which means we executed a penetration test on our running application.
Today, we are going to discuss what a pull request is and how we can protect our branches.
Romano, what are pull requests?
Let's have a look. So, in order to understand what a pull request is, we need to understand what exactly a branch is. When we develop in a project, then usually we have a main branch where the whole source code or the whole development lies. When we want to introduce now a change, then we create a branch where we are going to do the changes. As you can see here, we create that branch, and in the demo we will also see how to do that in GitHub. When we have created the branch, then we will work on that branch and we will add commit after commit to that branch. When we are done with our commits and we think now we are finished with the development, then we open a pull request. Now, when the pull request is open, our other team members can now review and discuss together with me about the changes that I did on this branch and in this pull request.
Oh, thinking about, am I only allowed to do a pull request when I think I'm finished with all the changes for a feature or bug fix?
No, absolutely not at all. You can always do a pull request and start a discussion. That's the great thing about pull requests. They are really a thing where you can discuss changes in your code.
But it's named pull request. So I want to pull my code into the original branch from my feature branch or bug fix. Not anymore?
You're absolutely right. So naming wise, and when you look at the history, then the pull request was really there to pull the code back to the main branch. But nowadays, we really use pull request to discuss changes in the code, and GitHub has done here a really good job, which you will see in the demo. You also can see that over there, where you can see that the discussion on my changes is going on, and also we will probably introduce changes while we are discussing the source code and adding more and more changes until the pull request is really finished and is approved and it goes into the main branch. This means when we are done, then we have validated everything, which means we have done the reviews by persons and also the automation, the execution of certain workflows has been done. So everything is validated and ready to be merged back into the main branch. So therefore, the last step of a pull request is merging it back to the main branch. So in summary, here you can see how such a pull request looks like and what the different steps of a pull request are.
Branch protection is the means to enforce the steps we saw before we actually merge into the target branch. Branch protection is all about defining the rules that must be applied before we can merge into a target branch. So the branch protection rules can be configured to require executing certain workflows that may include security checks. We can also configure to require an approval from a security expert or from an architect, for example, and we can define passing status checks that are required.
So enabling branch protection is in GitHub very simple. You go to the settings tab, you go to branches, and then you select branch protection rules. There you have many settings you can define, and we will have a look at that in the demo later in this video.
What did we figure out that works best when using pull requests, Romano?
So when we have pull requests, then there are certain best practices which you can apply when you are working with pull requests. First of all, do pull requests early, as we discussed it before, and do pull requests often and keep them small. As you might remember from my past videos which I did, it is all about keeping the batch size as small as possible, and this is also true when you are doing pull requests. Also very important to understand is a pull request doesn't have to be merged. It can also be rejected, of course.
Or it may be used to explore certain things and work out different alternatives together in the team.
Absolutely. You can also define templates for your pull requests, which is a very nice feature in GitHub. And then, of course, and this is the whole purpose of this video, you can define branch protection rules. And then our last recommendation would be take advantage of different merge methods. So think about whatever you want to squash all your commits.
So welcome to the demo part of this video. I'll show you first how I try to reduce some of the security findings we had by stepping up the version number of Spring Boot. I'll do that by editing the POM file. From 201, I just step up to 209. The next thing I'll do is I will introduce a new security finding or a new security bug based on a bad MD5 hash. So let me add the new text here. So what I did here is I just added this part basically, and this means I do an MD5 calculation based on the message. This MD5 calculation is done in this method here, and as MD5 is not considered safe anymore, I'd expect it to bring me an alert or a warning at least for this. And to make everything compile, we add the import statements naturally. Next thing we do is we will create a branch from this. So now, well, basically we explained that at the very beginning we start creating a branch. Now I forgot to do that, so what I'll do?
Yeah, Paddy, sometimes this happens. it can happen. It's absolutely no problem, because what you can do is create now the branches and move your changes directly to that new branch.
Okay, so let's do that. Create new branch, give it a proper name. And here we are, switching directly to the branch, obviously. Great. Look here, we have the changes. Yes, that's what we did. So let's commit that. Now, what's next?
Yeah, next we create now the pull request.
So I head back to the repository.
Yeah.
Look, it tells me that I have something committed on a new branch and I can directly create a pull request.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Or I can go to pull requests and create a new pull request from here.
Absolutely. Whatever you like.
So a new pull request from our fixes branch into the main branch. And I create that thing. Now what do we have here?
Yeah, what you can see for a pull request, you always give the pull request a title and you write something in there. And when you have created the pull request, then we can start together a discussion on this pull request.
Okay, let's do that. So here's now our pull request. So we have space for conversation here. We see the commits I made. We see also the files I've done. And when we go back to the overview, then we see that we could require approval, but there are none. We see that all checks have passed, but it's just one security check. And it's nothing like our pipeline that has run, but at least we have no conflict. So could you explain me this, please? Why didn't our pipeline run?
Yeah, sure. So when you remember back when we created our pipeline, we created that main pipeline YAML file. And there we defined that this pipeline only runs on the main branch. Let's go to that file, exactly there. And there you can see on push branches main pipeline. So we reduced the whole pipeline run only to branches, which is the main branch.
Okay, that's the pipeline definition. But why don't I see anything on the pull request?
Yeah, Paddy, this is the whole purpose of this video. This is because we have not yet configured the branch protection rules. And this is what we should do next.
Can you please show me how?
Yeah, sure, let's do. Okay, Paddy. Now, what we need to do first is we need to go to settings. And in here we have branches. And here you can see the branch protection rules. Now we will add a new branch protection rules. We could add here a branch name pattern if we want. And for our purpose, we will use the star to go with all the branches. Now, next, we can define that we require a pull request before merging. I think, Paddy, this is a good thing. Let's do that.
It's cool.
The next thing is also something which you will like. You can require an approval for that pull request.
Really cool.
As you can see, you can now define here the required number of approval before merging. In our case, because we are only us two on that repository, we will keep it with one. You can see that there are a couple of other things which you can configure. You can always read the documentation. It's really good stuff which you can configure. But what you want to have, Padi, is you want to have these required status checks before merging. So let's configure that. We click on that, and what we can see is that we can define that the required branches to be up to date before merging. This is something we want to have. And then we have the status checks in here. Now here we can now define which of the status checks should be executed. You can type in here, for example, build, and then add the build here. As you can see, we now need to add all the jobs here. We will do that now in the background and will be quite soon back. So in the meantime, we configured everything. Now you can see that we added here the build, the SCA, the license compliance check, SAST, the Docker image, the container image scan, the dust, the license compliance, and also the test results. And yes, it's quite on a detailed level, which you can configure that in here.
Well, to me, this felt not like very good usability, to be honest.
Yeah, true. You are absolutely right. I think the usability of that could be improved. So with that, let's scroll down. You can see that there are more configurations which you can do. One configuration which we want to point out is do not allow bypass the above settings. This could be quite useful if you have a production branch. So with that, let's head down and click create. So now what you can see, we created now our branch protection rule, which you can see here. And as you can see, you can also have multiple branch protection rules. So now let's go to our pull request and click on the pull request. What we can see now is that here some checks are now required.
Oh, pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. But as you can see, these checks are now required. Why are they not executed? Perhaps you remember back in the beginning of the video, I said that our pipeline only runs on the main branch. And this is, of course, now an issue which we need to go and fix. So now let's head back to the code, go to GitHub workflows and go to main pipeline. And here we can see branches, main, and this is now what we are going to change. I click on edit, and what I will do is I will just remove that so that our pipeline runs now on every branch. And I go and commit that directly. I will tell it here, pipeline runs on every branch, and I commit these changes. Let's head back to the pull request. Of course, this change had no impact on our pull request because the change was done on the main branch. In order to get this working, we need to close this pull request and create a new pull request. Let's do that quickly together. We head down here, we say close pull request, and we go again up here, create a new pull request. We select the branch and create now this pull request and say create pull request. And as you can see down here, the checks are still not executed, and GitHub gives us a hint because now the main branch has an update for us. We need to first update this branch and then everything should be executed. After refreshing the view, we can see that now the pipeline runs have started. You can see that we are building, we have the SCA which was executed, and you even can already see here that we also get test results. So now the pipeline run has finished of our pull request. We can see down here our 2 commits which we have done. We also see here the test results which we now nicely can see in this pull request. And then we now see the GitHub code scanning report, which nicely reports us that we have introduced this MD5 here.
Oh, this one is pretty nice. So we see new findings that we introduced with our commit. I like that. Where do I see what findings I resolved with this commit?
As you will see, Paddy, unfortunately not at all. But let's go through that. What you can do is click here on show pass or dismiss this alert, which is also quite nicely done. And you can now also start a conversation on such a topic. Okay, when we scroll down, then we see the next one, which is you can use a broken or risky cryptographic algorithm. And when we go a little bit more down, then we see the detected MD5 hash.
Oh, did you see that? It's 2 times actually the same issue we detect here. And the reason for this is that we have multiple tools in place and they both report the same thing now. That's okay.
Absolutely. You see here SemGrep that has reported that one, and up here it was CodeQL. When we scroll more down, we also see now the license compliance check, which has been executed. And then you see here all of the checks that have been executed in our pipeline. As you can see, 2 of them have failed. One was the dust scan and the CodeQL scan. You may have noticed that the dust scan has also failed. This is due to a rate limit which has been hit with our open source solution that we are using. So the first settings have now been applied so that these status checks are executed. That's done. And what you now can see is that this merging is still blocked because we are waiting one approval.
Now let's approve then and see whether we can progress. In the meantime, I've approved the change saying that the MD5 hash is just a hash function for internal use.
You can see the approval up here. So Paddy has now approved these changes. And also here you can see, okay, no security issue, just a hash for indexing. And with that, we can now head down here and do the merge. Yeah, and with that, because Paddy has now told us that it is okay to merge it back, we can click now here, this checkbox, and merge the pull request and say confirm merge. You can then see that it has been merged, so everything is now okay, and we can go back to the code. Just as a quick hint, under actions, you of course also see then these runs which have been executed, and here you can again see now the running pull request which is now introduced on the main branch.
And with that, we're at the end of this video. We discussed here how to apply branch protection and how to work with pull requests. We've laid special focus on how our security checks are visible on a pull request and what we can do with that. In our next video, we will introduce you to scheduled pipelines, a technique to make sure that also code that runs in production is always verified for new vulnerabilities.